Miss Marple sat in the front row, Mrs. Bantry beside her, the seats almost full. Cedric Drummond stood near the stage, tall, formal suit, checking his watch, looking around. Often. Carlo Montini moved between the musicians, short, sharp steps, silver hair, combed back, baton in hand. Giles Hathley leaned against a side rail, a dark suit, arms folded, eyes locked on Drummond, expression tight, not smiling. Miss Marple noticed the glare. It was fixed, didn't shift when Montini passed. Hathley kept his arms folded. Mrs. Bantry whispered, "Who is that?" "Hathley," Marple said. "He wanted the pavilion." A young woman walked past, carried a cello case, stopped near them, smiled. Briefly. "Betty Fawcett," she said. She pointed to the stage. "I play tonight." Her voice, even, no sign of nerves. Miss Marple nodded. "Your first time here?" Betty shook her head. "My grandfather built it. Feels odd to be back." Elsa Pym crossed the stage, small toolbox in hand, navy trousers, hair pulled back, tight, no wasted movement. Betty glanced at her. "She's the electrician, knows every wire in here." Montini raised a hand to Drummond. They spoke quickly. "Too far to hear." Hathley watched them both. One eyebrow lifted, tapped a finger on the rail. Marple shifted her gaze, eyes moving to the brass section. Between two stands, something caught the light. A coil of copper wire. Not on a reel, loose. Pushed halfway under a chair leg, thick cable. More than enough for a live line. No one noticed. Marple didn't point it out. She noted the position. 2 seats from the end. Near the second trombone. Drummond left Montini's side, walked toward the wing. Elsa Pym followed. They disappeared, behind a curtain. From her seat, Marple saw a gap. In the wing fabric, through it. Drummond and Elsa. He leaned toward her, hand gesturing low. She shook her head. He stepped closer, spoke again. Elsa looked down at the toolbox, opened it, picked up something small, closed her hand around it. She said something back. His face stayed tense. She nodded once, closed the box. Drummond looked toward the stage, then back to Elsa. No smiles, no laughter. Music tuning covered their voices. Too much noise. Marple couldn't hear a word. Elsa tucked the box under her arm. Drummond stepped aside. She walked past him. He stayed. Their eyes met. One last time. Then both looked away. Marple kept watching, not casual talk. Something was being arranged. She didn't yet know what. Montini raised his baton. The orchestra followed. No mistakes. Every entry sharp. Every note held. Betty's cello carried through the hall. Low, clear, controlled. Marple watched her fingers. No hesitation. Bow steady. Montini gave her a nod. Betty didn't react. Eyes fixed on the score. The piece ended. Applause. Montini stepped back, bowed once. Instruments lowered. Drummond moved to the side stage. Hathley stayed at the rail, still, watching. The interval began. Musicians set instruments aside. Some left the stage. Some stayed near their seats. Betty walked to the storage area, placed her cello case on a stand, checked the latches, walked off toward the refreshment area. Montini wiped his forehead, stepped to the edge of the stage, spoke to the first violinist. A clarinet player walked past Marple. "Brilliant first half," he said, to no one in particular. Marple scanned the stage. Montini was still there, or so she thought. Mrs. Bantry leaned in. "Someone said he went backstage." Marple frowned. "I see him right now." A horn player stepped in front. When he passed, Montini was gone. Behind them, 2 men talked. "Saw him heading toward the dressing rooms," one said. "That's odd," the other replied. "I saw him near the podium, just a moment ago." Conflicting accounts. 2 sightings, same moment in time. Marple looked toward the storage area, most of the instruments untouched. One figure crouched low near the cases, head bent, dark jacket, hands moving over something, face hidden. A violinist walked past, blocked her view. When the path cleared, the figure was gone. Betty returned to her case, checked the latches again, then left for the stage entrance. Elsa walked by, carrying a coil of cord. Her eyes swept the storage corner. She kept walking. Drummond appeared seconds later, looked into the same corner, stepped away without speaking. The interval ended. Musicians took their places. Montini reappeared at the podium, no sign of hurry. He gave the down beat. The second half began. The next morning, Betty met Marple on the boardwalk, cello case in her hand, expression uneasy. "I opened it just now," she said. "There's something strange inside." She set the case down, flipped the catches, opened the lid. Inside, black grains scattered against the blue lining, faint metallic sheen. Marple touched one with her fingertip. Not beach sand. Betty looked at her, voice low. "Tell me why this is here." Her hand hovered above the case. "It was shut the whole time. I lock it, always." Marple looked at the latches, both firm, no damage. "You didn't open it during the performance?" "Not once," Betty said. "I only opened it now." Marple picked up a few grains, held them in her palm, dark, metallic glint. "This is not beach sand," she said. Betty nodded quickly. "Our beach is pale." Marple straightened. "Let's compare." They walked to the pier. Betty carried the closed case. Marple stopped near the rail, looked down at the sand below. Golden, fine, nothing dark. She crouched, scooped a pinch, compared it to the black grains. Completely different. "Not from here," Marple said. Betty frowned. "Then where?" Marple pointed toward the pavilion. "Under there, maybe." They walked along the boardwalk, reached the edge, looked down between the supports. Sand darker here. Not golden. Almost black. Tiny specks of metal flashing in the light. Marple nodded. "Same as in your case." Betty looked uneasy. "How would it get inside?" Marple's voice stayed level. "Only if the case was under here, or someone with sand on them handled it." Betty shook her head. "I never went under here." Marple studied her face. "No one else touched your case?" Betty hesitated, eyes moving away. "During the interval, I think Drummond was near it." Marple's eyes narrowed. "He spoke to you?" "Number I saw him checking something backstage, close to where my case was." Marple noted this silently. Betty kept talking. "He didn't pick it up, but I couldn't see his hands the whole time." They walked back toward the main pier. Marple kept the grains in a handkerchief. Betty carried her case again. Near the rail, two figures stood apart from the crowd. One was Elsa Pym, the other Giles Hathley. They were close together, heads tilted toward each other, speaking in low voices. Elsa held her toolbox against her side. Hathley's hands stayed in his pockets. Neither looked toward the stage. Neither looked toward Marple. Betty slowed her steps. "Why are they talking?" she whispered. Marple didn't answer. She kept watching. Elsa glanced over her shoulder, saw something. Her eyes moved quickly back to Hathley. Hathley's jaw tightened. He said something short. Elsa nodded once. They separated. Elsa walked toward the stage entrance. Hathley stayed by the rail. Marple's eyes followed them both. Something connected them, and it was not about music. The audience settled. Montini stepped to the podium. He lifted his baton. Rule Britannia was on the stand. The orchestra waited. Marple watched him. His stance was firm. Eyes moved across the players. He gave the downbeat. The first notes rang out. A faint pop reached Marple's ear. She looked toward the podium. A smell reached her next. Sharp. Unusual. Not from instruments. She glanced at Mrs. Bantry. No sign, she noticed. Montini's arm came down. A blue spark jumped from the stand. He froze, baton still in hand. His face tightened. No movement from him. Then his knees bent. He fell forward. The baton slipped from his hand. The orchestra stopped. Several players stood. Chairs scraped. Murmurs spread. A man near the aisle ran forward. It was Dr. Haydock. He climbed onto the stage. "Stand back," he ordered. He knelt beside Montini, hands pressed at the chest, fingers felt at the neck. Marple watched his face. The doctor's mouth set in a line. He stood, turned to the crowd. "Massive heart attack," he said. Death was instant. A low ripple of voices moved through the audience. Some began to leave their seats. Inspector Slack appeared at the side of the stage. He looked at Montini's body, then at Dr. Haydock. "Heart," Slack said. "Too much excitement. Foreigners are like that." Marple's eyes moved to him. "You're certain?" Slack shrugged. What else would it be? Marple didn't answer. Her eyes went back to the podium. The stand was metal, the sheets still in place. The silver baton lay a few feet away. No scorch marks she could see from here. The musicians stepped away. Some carried instruments off stage. Others stood in small groups, talking low. Slack moved toward the exit. Haydock followed. Drummond spoke briefly to two men near the wings. Hathley remained at the side rail. Expression unreadable. The crowd thinned. Only a few people lingered. Marple stepped forward. Mrs. Bantry followed. She reached the edge of the stage, looked up at the podium. The smell was still there. Faint, not smoke, not dust. She glanced around. No one was close enough to hear her. She stepped onto the stage, bent near the stand. The odor was stronger here. She knew it. Ozone. Elsa stood by a table. 3 microphones lay in a row. "Same model," she said. "Same age, same wiring." She picked up the first, plugged it into a small amp. Sound was clean. She unplugged it, set it aside. The second was the same. No noise, no spark. Then she picked up the third. She plugged it in. A low hum filled the air. A blue spark jumped across the grill. Marple watched closely. Elsa kept her grip steady. "This one's trouble," she said. "It shouldn't do that." Marple pointed at it. "This was where during the show?" Elsa's eyes moved to the stage. "Center, right at Montini's podium." Marple noted that. The hum continued. She leaned closer. The metal grill was damp. Drops clung to the mesh. Marple touched one with a fingertip. It wasn't just water. She rubbed it between her fingers. It felt gritty. Elsa watched her. "Condensation. It happens." Marple held her fingers up. "There's residue." Elsa shrugged. "Salt air, and the grill's old." Marple looked at the other 2 mics. Their grills were dry, no residue. Elsa set the faulty mic down. She pulled a cloth from her pocket, wiped the grill. The cloth showed faint marks, light gray streaks. "Mineral traces," Marple said. Elsa shook her head. "Just build up from use." Marple pointed at the rubber shield. It looked newer than the rest of the mic. "That was replaced," Elsa admitted. "Yesterday. The shield was slit. Had to fix it." "How?" "Fresh tape. Good as new." Marple's eyes stayed on her. Elsa avoided them. "This level of moisture isn't normal," Marple said. Elsa glanced away. "The weather was heavy. The air's wet here." Marple didn't reply. Her hand stayed near the mic. Another spark jumped. The hum deepened. Elsa unplugged it. "I'll strip it down, find the fault." Marple spoke evenly. "A fault like this could hurt someone." Elsa nodded once. "If they touched it while touching metal, yes. Like a stand or a baton." Elsa didn't answer. Marple stepped back. She looked at the mic again. The dampness still glistened. Elsa wound the cord, placed the mic back on the table. Marple asked, "When was it last handled before the second half?" Elsa hesitated. "Set up before the show." "That's all." Elsa's jaw tightened. Her eyes stayed on the cord. "No," she said finally. "There was one more time." Marple waited. Elsa didn't look up. "Drummond asked me to adjust it," she said, "right before the second half began." Marple walked along the boardwalk. Fresh repairs showed darker patches. The tar was still soft. She stopped. Two clear sets of footprints crossed the patch. Both led toward a small door under the pavilion. A brass plate was fixed beside it. It read, "Switch Room," below, in smaller letters, "Authorized personnel only." Marple bent slightly. One set was broad, evenly spaced. The soles had a formal dress pattern. The other set was narrow, more pointed at the toe. The soles carried a small repeated image. She leaned closer. The shapes looked like stylized birds, seagulls. She straightened. Both sets went toward the door. Only one set came back. Voices approached. Slack and Sergeant Lake. She stepped aside. They stopped when she spoke. "These seem worth noting." Slack frowned at the ground. "Footprints. People walk here." Lake crouched. He studied the soles. "These are different sizes. 2 men." "Toward the switch room," Marple said. Only one set returned. Slack shrugged. "Could have left another way." Marple's eyes moved to the shrubs around the building. 3 sides blocked, 1 door. Lake nodded slowly. "The broad ones are dress shoes, the narrow ones, yacht shoes." "Expensive," Marple added. Lake traced one narrow print with a finger. "Seagull logo, I've seen it." "Hathley," Marple said. "I noticed them at the concert." Lake looked at the broader prints. "Size matches Drummond." Slack shifted his weight. "You're saying they both went in?" "I'm saying that's what the prints suggest," Marple replied. Slack didn't answer. He looked at the door. A padlock was fixed above the handle. Lake tried it. Locked. Slack signaled to a constable. "Key." A few minutes later, the door opened. They stepped inside. The air was warm. The space was small. Rows of electrical panels lined one wall. Lake's eyes moved over the wiring. He pointed to a splice. "New tape here. Wire replaced here." Marple stepped closer. Several sections looked recent. The cuts were clean. Slack turned to Elsa, who had just arrived. She stood in the doorway. "You've been working here?" Elsa's eyes moved over the panels. Her mouth tightened. "No." "This is your system," Slack said. "I didn't touch this," Elsa replied. Her voice was flat. Lake looked from her to the wiring. "This isn't old work. It's fresh." Elsa crossed her arms. "Then someone's been in here without me." Marple watched her face. No visible surprise. Elsa looked at Slack. "You think I did this?" Slack didn't answer. Marple's gaze stayed on the new tape. Whoever made these changes knew exactly what they were doing. Marple walked past the stage. Her eyes moved to the lantern above the podium. She stopped. The glass bulb was missing. The lantern's metal ring still hung in place. The socket was empty. Lake joined her. "Stage lighting?" "Yes," Marple said. "Not working without a bulb." She stepped closer. The socket showed green marks. Corrosion. Lake looked up at the rafters. It wouldn't vanish on its own. They searched the floor. No bulb in sight. A stagehand arrived. He shook his head. "No one reported a broken lantern." Marple kept moving. She went down the side stairs. Under the pavilion was darker. She scanned the ground. Shards caught the light. She crouched. Small curved pieces of glass lay near a post. The shape matched a bulb. Lake collected them in a handkerchief. More fragments showed blackened edges. Beside them lay a short length of insulated wire. It had been cut cleanly. Another piece of wire still had the base of the bulb attached. The metal was corroded. Marple tapped the metal with a pen. It flaked. They stepped back. Lake frowned. This wasn't from a fall alone. Looks like something burned. Marple nodded. Or overheated. They returned to the stage. Slack met them halfway. What now? Lake unwrapped the fragments. Lantern bulb, found underneath. Slack stared at the corroded base. Old. Lake shook his head. Number this is fresh damage. Slack didn't respond. He turned the glass in his hand. Salt crystals clung to the edge. Marple noticed them, too. She touched one with a fingertip. It crumbled. Salt water, she said. Lake held the base to the light. The corrosion was worse on one side. Exposed for a while. Slack crossed his arms. Storm, maybe. No storm since last month, Lake said. This happened during the event, or just before. Marple's eyes moved back to the podium. The lantern hung directly above it. Lake turned the socket slightly. The wiring inside showed new joins. He looked at Marple. Same type of tape as in the switch room. Marple nodded slowly. Slack looked at both of them. You're thinking it's connected? Lake didn't answer. He bent over the plan of the building lying on a chair. His finger traced a line from the lantern to the outer wall. He looked toward the beach side. At high tide, he said, this lantern's wiring could drop through that opening. Marple followed his gaze. The outer boards were loose, near a corner. Lake pointed to the waterline mark. If the wire was extended, he said, the bulb could hang straight into seawater. The tide chart was pinned on the wall. Lake marked the next high tide. They waited until night. Slack stayed near the north steps. Lake took the south. Marple stood by the pier entrance. The water was already rising. Waves lapped under the boards. A shadow moved near the center supports. Marple adjusted her position. Elsa stepped into view. She carried a small metal case. Marple watched her kneel. Elsa opened the case. Tools glinted inside. She pulled out a screwdriver, worked at a panel near the beams. Lake signaled from the other side. Slack moved closer. They stayed hidden. Elsa removed a short section of cable. She set it on a cloth. Her movements were quick. Marple took a step forward. Elsa turned suddenly. She saw them. What are you doing here? Slack asked. Elsa straightened. Drummond sent me. For what? Lake asked. Safety faults, Elsa replied. Ordered repairs before tomorrow's matinee. Marple's eyes moved to the panel. Fresh tape was on one join. A coil of wire sat beside it. Slack crossed his arms. Why at high tide? Easier to reach the lower runs, Elsa said. Less bending. Lake raised an eyebrow. You mean the runs that hang into the water? Elsa didn't answer. She picked up the coil, placed it back in her case. Marple pointed at a cloth-wrapped object beside the case. What's that? Elsa hesitated. Old parts. Let's see, Lake said. Elsa stepped back. Her hand stayed on the case lid. Lake moved forward. He unwrapped the cloth. Inside were several pieces of glass, curved, clear. Marple exchanged a glance with Slack. Lake turned the pieces over. A threaded metal base was attached to one. It was corroded on one side. Bulb, he said. Elsa shook her head. Broken junk. I'm disposing of it. Lake matched the curvature to the stage lantern's size. Fits exactly, he said. Elsa took a breath. It's from the spares bin. Marple's voice was quiet. Why is it in pieces? Elsa didn't reply. Lake reached into the cloth again. He found a short length of wire with the bulb's contact still fixed. Salt crystals clung to it. Lake looked at her. This was the missing bulb, he said. Elsa's jaw tightened. She closed the case slowly. Lake kept the bulb in his hand. The cloth was still damp. Slack stepped closer. "Where exactly were you planning to put this back?" Elsa didn't answer. The tide rose higher. Water touched the base of the support beams. Lake looked down at her bag. His hand moved inside. When it came back out, he was holding the reassembled bulb. Mrs. Bantry was sorting programs. She had kept 2 from the night of the concert. One slipped onto the tea tray. A drop from the kettle landed on it. The paper darkened in one spot. Letters began to show. She frowned. "Jane, look at this." Marple took the program. The letters formed slowly. They were uneven, but clear. The message read, "He must not conduct, or the lights will burn him." Marple traced the words with her finger. The ink faded as it dried. "Invisible ink," Marple said. Mrs. Bantry nodded. "I only saw it because of the steam." They brought the program to Lake. He studied the letters. "Brown discoloration," he said. "Likely lemon juice or milk. Old trick." Marple placed the program beside the pavilion visitor book. She opened to the page for the reopening night. "Compare these," she said. Lake leaned in. The slant was the same. The loop of the H matched exactly. "Hathleigh," Lake said. The signature in the book read, "J. Hathleigh." The threat had the same curls and slant. Mrs. Bantry folded her arms. "Why would he warn, then still attend?" Marple didn't answer. She was still looking at the letters. Lake closed the book. Enough to confront him. Slack entered the room. He looked at the table. "What's this?" "Threat note," Lake said. "Hidden in a program, matches Hathleigh's signature." Slack didn't move closer. Instead, he smiled faintly. "That might explain something else." Marple raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" Slack pulled a notebook from his pocket. He flipped a page. "Elsa's statement," he said. "She's been talking." Mrs. Bantry leaned forward. Marple stayed still. Slack read from the page. "She says Hathleigh paid her, cash, for sabotage work." "Sabotage?" Lake asked. "Yes," Slack said. "She admits to adjusting the mic and moving the wiring." Mrs. Bantry's mouth tightened, and Montini still died. "According to her," Slack went on, "Hathleigh wanted the performance disrupted. Embarrass Drummond, nothing more." Marple's eyes narrowed. "She denies planning harm." "Exactly," Slack said. "She says no one mentioned murder." Lake looked at Marple. "Do you believe her?" Marple didn't answer. Her gaze went back to the program. Slack tapped the notebook. "She also claims Hathleigh insisted it happened that night. Not later, not sooner." Mrs. Bantry gave a short laugh. "That's convenient." Slack shrugged. "All I can tell you is, she's admitted sabotage, and she's tied it to Hathleigh. But she's not claiming he ordered more than that." Lake closed his own notebook. "So either she's lying, or someone else stepped in." Marple looked up. "Whoever that was. Still hasn't been named." Slack shut his notebook. "She's clear about one thing," he said. "Hathleigh paid her for sabotage, not murder." The baton lay on the table. Silver, polished, longer than most. Marple reached for it. Her fingers felt the cool metal. Lake watched her. "Drummond says it was a gift," he said. Marple turned it slowly. The surface had faint scratches. She tapped the end. It rang dull. "That's not hollow," she said. Lake raised an eyebrow. "Weighted?" "Perhaps," Marple said. She twisted the end cap. It resisted, then turned. A faint hiss escaped. She pulled the cap away. Inside was liquid. She tilted the baton. A few drops slid toward the opening. The liquid glistened, not clear. Lake fetched a dish. She poured a small amount. Metallic specks swirled in the fluid. "Salt water," Lake said after smelling it. Marple nodded. "And filings." Lake peered inside. The filings were fine, gray. He touched the rim. Corrosion showed inside the threads. This wasn't here for decoration, he said. Marple weighed the baton in her hand. Heavy enough to notice, she said. Lake leaned on the table. Why would Montini accept this? Marple's eyes narrowed. Perhaps he didn't know. She set the baton back. Her fingers rested on the cap. The metal was warm from her hand. She rolled it between her fingers. Lake looked thoughtful. The mic sparked, he said. The baton is metal, conductive. Marple nodded slowly. With salt water and filings inside, she said, conductivity increases sharply. Lake glanced at her. Accident? Marple shook her head. No. She unscrewed the cap again. The threads were worn. Not new work. This was prepared earlier. Lake tapped the table. Elsa worked on the mic. Hathley wanted disruption. But this is lethal, Marple finished. They both looked at the baton. Its polished surface caught the light. Lake stepped back. If the baton touched the live mic, Marple didn't move. She was still holding the thought. Lake continued. The current would run through the baton, straight to his hands. And through his body, Marple said quietly. She touched the inside of the cap again. Salt crusted her fingertip. Lake exhaled. That explains the collapse. Marple's eyes stayed on the baton. And the smell of ozone, she said. She placed the cap back on, screwed it tight. Lake crossed his arms. No wonder the mic alone couldn't kill. The baton completed the path. Marple looked at him. It wasn't just sabotage. It was design. The room fell quiet. She set the baton in the center of the table. Her hand stayed on it a moment longer. Then she set it. The baton and the faulty mic formed the lethal circuit. Lake opened his notebook. Witness accounts, he said. Marple sat across from him. Mrs. Bantry poured tea. First, Lake began. Hathley was seen with the mare. How long? Marple asked. Part of the interval, Lake said. Not all. People say he left after 5 minutes. Where did he go? Marple asked. Lake checked the page. No one is sure. He was seen again near the foyer. Marple nodded. And Drummond? Lake turned a page. He was spotted backstage. 2 separate sightings. Doing what? Mrs. Bantry asked. One said he was talking to Elsa. Another saw him, checking stage props. Marple leaned forward. How long between these sightings? 8 to 10 minutes, Lake said. Marple tapped the table. That's our gap. Enough time for either to reach the baton. Mrs. Bantry frowned. Would they know what to do? Marple didn't answer. She was making notes of her own. Lake went on. That window is unaccounted for. No one can confirm where they both were at the same moment. Mrs. Bantry looked uneasy. So either could have done it. Exactly, Lake said. Betty entered the room. She still had her cello case in hand. You asked about the interval, Betty said. Marple gestured for her to sit. Tell us. Betty set the case on the floor. I was walking past the stage, she said. Crowd noise was behind me. She paused. Then I heard something, like metal hitting wood. Marple's eyes lifted. Where? Near the podium, Betty said. Not loud, just a small clink. Lake wrote it down. You didn't look? No, Betty said. I thought it was someone setting something down. Marple made another note. What time was this? Toward the end of the interval, Betty said. People were coming back in. Lake closed his notebook for a moment. That sound could be the baton being placed back. Or something else entirely, Marple said. Betty looked between them. You think it's important? It might be, Marple said. Betty stood. That's all I remember. She left the room. Lake reopened his notebook. Metallic noise fits with the baton, but we still don't know who had it last. Mrs. Bantry asked, Could Elsa know? Lake shrugged. She worked on the wiring. She was backstage. The door opened. Elsa stepped in. Her tool belt was slung over her shoulder. "I heard you're asking about the interval," she said. Marple's gaze fixed on her. "Tell us where you were." Elsa hesitated. "I was checking wiring under the stage." "With anyone?" Lake asked. She looked down. Hathly. He'd asked to see how the connections worked. Marple's pen stopped moving. Elsa met her eyes. "He had access to my wiring before the show." Slack entered the room. He held a file. "Drummond's accounts," he said. Marple waited. Mrs. Bantry leaned closer. "Debt," Slack said. "Heavy, months overdue on multiple loans." "How heavy?" Lake asked. "Enough to sink the pavilion without outside funds," Slack said. Marple tapped the table. "And the insurance?" Slack flipped a page. "Policy covers management death during public event. Large payout to the estate." Lake frowned. "That's motive." "Possible," Marple said. Slack shut the file. "That's not all. Hathly's plan." Marple looked up. "What plan?" Slack opened another folder. "Arcade expansion, right on the pier. Would replace the pavilion if it failed." Mrs. Bantry frowned. "So he'd profit from it closing." Slack nodded. "Yes, he's been pushing the council for months." Lake wrote notes. 2 men, 2 motives. Marple kept her eyes on Slack. "What about Elsa?" Slack shifted his weight. "She's been vocal. Doesn't like foreign musicians getting local work. Claims they take jobs from her friends." Lake leaned back. "That's resentment. Not enough for murder." Marple spoke evenly. "Resentment can be a tool in the right hands." Slack folded his arms. She admitted Hathly paid her for technical changes. Says she didn't know about lethal intent. Lake glanced at Marple. She could be lying. Marple didn't answer. Her mind was elsewhere. Mrs. Bantry broke the silence. "So Drummond needed money. Hathly wanted the building. Elsa had a grievance." Lake added, "And all 3 had access." Slack turned toward the door. "I'm checking their movements again." "Good," Marple said. An hour later, Lake returned from the quay. He carried a small paper bag. "What's that?" Slack asked. Lake set it on the table. "From Hathly's car." Slack looked surprised. "You searched it?" "Parked in plain sight. Window down. I looked," Lake said. Marple opened the bag carefully. Inside was a smaller pouch, leather, worn. She loosened the drawstring. Gray dust spilled onto the table. "Metal filings," she said. Lake nodded. "Matches what was inside Montini's baton." Slack stared at it. "You're sure?" Marple used a pen tip to stir the dust. "Yes, same weight, same color, same corrosion smell." Mrs. Bantry looked uneasy. "That puts Hathly close to the killing." Lake crossed his arms. "It does more than that. It puts the means in his possession." Slack tapped the pouch, and a reason to hide it. Marple's gaze stayed fixed on the dust. Her voice was quiet. "This is not the end of the chain, but it is a strong link." Lake closed the pouch. He slipped it back into the paper bag. He looked at Marple. "You know what this means." She nodded. "It means Hathly's story is about to break." Elsa laid a folded sheet on the table. Lake moved it closer. "Your diagram?" he asked. Elsa nodded. "Every connection, before the show." Marple studied the lines. Colored pencil marked the circuits. "This is the mic route," Elsa said. "Low voltage feed, safe, just enough to startle." Slack frowned. "Not enough to kill?" "Never," Elsa said. "It was a scare setup. Flash and hum, harmless." Marple traced a path with her finger. "From here to the podium." Elsa leaned forward. "That's the original loop. Ends here." Lake pointed at another section. "And this." Elsa's jaw tightened. "That wasn't mine." Thicker lines ran to a separate breaker, heavy gauge wire. Straight to mains current, she said. No safety cut. Slack's eyes narrowed. So someone added a kill path. Elsa kept her gaze on the diagram. Yes, after I finished. Marple asked, when could this have been done? Elsa shrugged. Any time before the second half, if they had access to the switch room. Lake thought aloud. Hathli had the shoes for that tar path. Drummond had the key. Elsa crossed her arms. Both knew the layout. Both could reach this point in minutes. Slack tapped the table. And this addition was meant to kill, not scare. Elsa didn't answer. Marple spoke. The baton completed the circuit. Lake added, which means whoever added this knew about the baton's contents. Elsa shifted in her chair. That detail wasn't mine, either. Mrs. Bantry entered with a tray. No one touched it. Slack turned back to Elsa. Why the scare set up? Payment, she said. Hathli wanted to rattle Drummond, force him into a bad performance, push the pavilion toward failure. Lake looked at Marple. And then someone upgraded it to lethal. Marple closed the diagram. This is no longer about one man's sabotage. It's about two men's intersecting plans. Slack asked, could Hathli have made these changes himself? Elsa hesitated. He's no electrician, but he could follow a simple swap if shown. By Drummond? Lake asked. Elsa gave a small shrug. Or anyone with basic skill, but the timing had to be right. Marple set the folded sheet aside. The right moment, the right tools, the right motive. Slack stood. He looked at Lake. We can't wait. Lake nodded. Both men? Slack's tone was firm. Yes, together. He stepped toward the door. Bring them in, now. Lake reached for his notebook. Elsa sat back, eyes down. Marple's voice was steady. This will not end quietly. Slack paused at the doorway. It won't need to. He turned to Lake. Questioning starts tonight. Hathli sat forward. I never touched that wiring, he said. Slack's eyes narrowed. You paid, Elsa? I paid for a scare, Hathli replied. Not a killing. Elsa looked at him. You wanted him humiliated? Hathli gave a small nod. Yes, nothing more. Slack shifted to Drummond. You knew about the changes? Drummond shook his head. I knew Elsa had been in the switch room. I didn't know Hathli was involved. Lake leaned in. Yet you had the key. I'm the manager, Drummond said. Of course I had the key. Slack glanced at Elsa. You admit partial guilt? Elsa crossed her arms. I wired for low voltage, just enough to shock, no danger to life. And you expected no one to interfere? Marple asked. Elsa's eyes dropped. I thought the setup was hidden. I was wrong. Hathli cut in. She's the one with the skill, not me. Drummond added, and not me either. I wouldn't risk the whole reopening. Lake pointed at both men. Either of you could have touched that baton. Hathli frowned. I never went near it. Drummond's voice rose. I barely spoke to Montini before the show. Slack stayed calm. Elsa, who else knew about the mic change? No one, she said. I told no one except Hathli. Marple's voice was quiet, but someone knew enough to fill that baton. Elsa's head turned sharply. That wasn't me. Drummond stared at her. Are you certain? Yes, Elsa replied. I didn't even know it could be opened. Hathli leaned back. Maybe Montini did it himself. Marple shook her head. No conductor fills his own baton with salt water and filings. Slack tapped his pencil. One of you had the time. One of you had the access. One of you made the kill possible. Drummond muttered, Not me. Hathli said, Nor me. Elsa whispered, I never meant... Slack cut her off. Meaning is irrelevant. Result is fact. Lake looked at Marple. What now? Marple opened her bag. She reached inside. Her hand came out holding a small plastic envelope. Inside was a metal cylinder, the baton's end cap. Drummond stared at it. Hathely's eyes narrowed. Elsa leaned forward. "This was removed," Marple said. "Filled, then screwed back on." Slack asked, "How do you know?" Marple lifted the envelope higher. "Because I had it examined." She paused. "They found something else." Hathely shifted in his seat. Drummond's jaw tightened. Elsa's hands gripped the table. Marple looked at each of them in turn. Her voice was even. "Fingerprints." Slack waited. "Whose?" Marple held the moment. Only one set. She placed the envelope on the table. On the inside of the cap. Everyone stared. Marple's eyes stayed on Drummond, and she spoke the name. Marple sat still. "All of you played a part," she said. Slack waited. "Go on." Hathely began it. Marple continued. "He wanted Montini humiliated." Hathely's mouth tightened. "That's a lie." Marple ignored him. "He paid Elsa to wire the microphone for a low-voltage shock. Nothing fatal." Elsa shifted. "That's all I agreed to." "But," Marple said, "Hathely saw an opportunity." She turned to Slack. "He knew about Montini's silver baton. He knew it could be opened." Slack nodded slowly. "Go on." Hathely prepared it. Salt water, metal filings, enough to complete a lethal circuit with the wired mic. Elsa shook her head. "I didn't know that." Marple looked at her. "I believe you. You gave him the base. He built on it." Hathely's eyes flicked to the door. "I didn't." "You did," Marple cut in. "During the interval, 8 to 10 minutes unaccounted for, you had time to swap the baton." Slack asked, "And Drummond?" "His part was different," Marple said. "He was drowning in debt. Hathely promised to cover him if he looked the other way." Drummond swallowed hard. "I didn't know about the baton." "You didn't need to," Marple said. "You only had to let Elsa and Hathely have access to the wiring and the stage." Slack leaned back. "So Drummond's guilty of enabling, not murder." "Yes," Marple said. "Hathely alone made it deadly." Elsa spoke softly. "I thought it was just a jolt, enough to embarrass him." Marple's gaze was steady. "Hathely didn't tell you his true plan." Hathely's jaw clenched. "You can't prove—" "I can," Marple interrupted. "Your fingerprints are inside the baton cap. No one else's." Silence. Slack moved toward him. Hathely stayed in his chair. "You set up the kill," Slack said. "You used Elsa's work. You used Drummond's desperation." Hathely's eyes hardened. "You'll never get me to—" Slack took out his handcuffs. "You'll speak at the station." Lake stepped to Elsa. "You'll be charged with aiding sabotage." Elsa nodded weakly. "I understand." Drummond exhaled. "I never thought it would come to this." Marple looked at him. "It came to this because greed rarely stops where it begins." Slack hauled Hathely to his feet. Lake stood beside Elsa. The room was quiet except for the click of metal on wrists. Hathely turned to Marple. "You think you've solved it? You think you know everything?" Marple said nothing. Slack pulled him toward the door. Elsa followed with Lake. Drummond stayed seated, head in hands. Marple rose slowly. Her eyes followed Hathely as he was led out. At the doorway, Hathely stopped. He looked back at her, and he smiled. The pavilion stayed closed. Police seals on every door, crowds gone, only officers moved inside. Betty stood near Marple. "Thank you," she said. Marple nodded. "You were careful, that helped." Betty smiled faintly. "I only told the truth." Marple glanced at her. "The truth often hides in small things." Betty waited. Marple continued. "A grain of sand, a thread of copper, a mark on a cap." Betty frowned. "You knew from that?" "It was enough to start," Marple said. "One detail leads to another, step by step." Slack approached. "Case is closed for now," he said. "Forensics will finish their part." Marple nodded once. Keep the baton under lock. Slack smirked. It's evidence. He left with his files. Betty shifted. Elsa, do you think she told you everything? Marple looked toward the window. Perhaps not. She swore she didn't know about the baton. She swore, Marple repeated. Betty hesitated. You don't believe her? I believe she told enough to save herself, Marple said. Betty glanced at the empty stage. It's strange. Feels like it's still going on. Marple studied her. Some cases never truly end. They just wait. Lake came in with papers. Elsa's lawyer has arrived, he said. She's holding to her statement. Marple asked, No changes? None, Lake said. Still claims Hathaway handled the baton alone. Marple looked down at her gloves. Perhaps she's right. Or perhaps she's protecting someone. Betty asked, Protecting who? Marple didn't answer. She picked up her bag. Betty followed her toward the exit. The echo of their steps felt too loud. At the door, Marple stopped. Remember, Betty, the smallest things carry the most weight. Betty waited for more. Marple stayed silent. They stepped outside. The air felt different, not better, not worse, just different. Lake passed them on his way in. He tipped his hat. Good day, Miss Marple. Marple watched him go. Then she looked at Betty. Stay observant. About what? Betty asked. Marple's eyes narrowed. Elsa's story. Betty frowned. You think? Marple cut her off. I think she knows more than she said. They reached the street. Police vans were pulling away. Betty spoke softly. What if she's hiding something dangerous? Marple answered. Then it will surface. Betty glanced back at the pavilion. Elsa stood in the doorway. Her eyes met Marple's. Neither looked away. Elsa's expression was unreadable. Her lips moved, too far to hear. Marple's gaze didn't shift. Elsa raised one finger, pressed it to her lips, and smiled.